So we begin here in this process of doing this, and he tells us how to do this. Our book is very simple. Number one, we talk to God about it, and I think this is in the start and the middle. God, this is easy enough to know. This is great. He already knows it anyway. And I think he just wanted to hear us say it out loud so he knows that we'll know it. That's all it is. You know what I mean? He already knows. There's no new information, but he, hearing us say it, knows that for the first time we see the light, that we begin to see these things. And this maybe, is our first communication, and it's very difficult. Maybe having just made contact with God. Maybe it's our first time and sit down and I think a lot of times, most time we have trouble with step 5. People are constantly staring at the last part, another human being. And I think if we would work it, the step is talk to God about it first. Talk to God about it. Whatever our conception or understanding at this point is very simple. But just talk to God as we understand Him about what we have saw in our inventory. So first time, I think that we can see that we're not bad people. We're just sick people trying to get well. We're not bad people trying to get good. Biggest thing wrong with just like really most people. They're all good people. They just got some things out of the wrong place. Our book talks about rearrangements and some adjustments. We got some of the things that belong over here, and some over here. Everything's out of whack. You know what I mean? And we're going to get rid of anything. We're going to put some things back in order. And so we begin, and we talk to God about it. And then next we talk to ourselves about it. And boy, it's a great, I think that I heard a guy say one of the greatest meetings that anybody ever has in his life, and I think that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is all about, enables us to do. And some people never have it. One of the biggest, greatest meetings you're going to ever attend is that one big meeting you're going to have with yourself. Boy, that's, I never want to meet myself. I used to walk in the bathroom somewhere and I'd try to shave, turning away from the mirror. And every once in a while, regardless to what we do, we're naturally human beings, and our minds turn on ourselves. Our minds turn inward into our life occasionally. And all the alcohol and all the confusion. Every once in a while, we alcoholics have a little glimpse of ourselves. And it's scary. Remember sometime at a bar, or sometime getting out of bed, or many, many times during my life with alcohol, my mind would reflect back on me. And I would start looking at me. And boy, I'd say, boy, let's get a drink and get our minds off of that. Don't think about that. That's natural. We run from ourselves, hide from ourselves. And for the first time in our life, after admitting to God, we will be able to face ourselves. After. Through the grace of God. And I think this is great. Boy, this meeting began for me many years ago. And I have some good meetings with me. Boy, I have many hours in the last 20-something years. I have had many, many hours with me. And it's the most enjoyable thing in the world is to be with yourself. It's great. And we argue sometimes. We have some great conversations. I wonder if I drive down the street and I see people looking at me, I don't know, we just have some good conversation. But it's great to have a meeting with yourself. And then after we accomplish this, then it talks about another person. For the first time, this is, but if we have overcome these first two hurdles, we're prepared for this. And we can see how the intensity builds and why it's so difficult just to avoid these things and try to do. We can't work the step that way. But once we have done these things, then we can come to another human being. And I think for the first time in our lives, and our book is very complete, it tells us how to do all this. It tells us exactly how to do this step. It says we got the inventory. It tells us even how to select the person to take the inventory away. It's no problem today because there are many, many people in the fellowship around Alcoholics Anonymous who have been through the same things you've been through. If you're new here tonight, you're not going to tell them anything that's going to excite them. And the only thing you're going to talk about the exact nature of your problem. He's not interested in what you did wrong. You could talk forever about what you did wrong, and it isn't of any great value. And I think with too much we concentrate on what I did wrong. What did I did wrong? I want to tell you and confess. Well, that has some cleansing effect. But if you don't talk about and learn what sort of thinking caused you to do that, you're going to be down there with a new batch up next week. You have to get down to the exact cause of the wrong. And these are the things we saw in the inventory. This is why the inventory has to be correct, or else you can't do nothing in step 5 but talk about what you did wrong. You get a cleansing effect. Well, we got to see the exact nature. Now, once we see this, our book tells us how to select someone. And our book was complete, and I love the big book. And it's so easy to take our steps with the book. On page 74 of the book, it tells us how to do everything, how to select someone to take this with. Of course, it's not a problem because we have plenty of sponsors. We have plenty of people, knowledgeable people around now here at this time in 1987. But remember, in 1939, there wasn't anybody around. Someone in New York wrote the book and sent it here to Little Rock. And the guy here in Little Rock, he didn't say, go talk to your sponsor, because there wasn't any sponsors here. And it had to be a complete book. It had to inform the guy how to handle everything. So it told him how to find someone to take step 5. And the book is still in its original form, hadn't been changed. And I love this section of the book. Right now, naturally, we think before we choose a person to whom we think take this intimate and confidential step. Now it says, those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, of course, want to go to a proper point of authority. If you belong to that religion, then you take that route. He said, though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk to someone in ordained religion, established religion. And we often find such people quick to see and understand our problems. That's true. And of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand the alcoholic. Okay, he's given us certain suggestions. Now, he says if we cannot do this, we may search out an acquaintance or a close-mouthed friend. Boy, that close-mouthed, understanding friend. Now, in 1939, this is what you had to do. Probably go to work and find some guy you work with and say, hey, man, I want to take step 5 with you. On page 75, he begins to tell us, he said, when we have decided who is to hear our story, when we have decided this, and we got a sponsor, it's very simple, it's very easy what we do. He says, we have a written inventory. We have these sheets all filled out. We have the information. And this is as we see it. And we go to this person, and he goes over these things in great detail. He goes over the first resentment. And he's not involved in this resentment. Remember, he wasn't there. He can see the truth about it. He can see the exact nature of it. And as he goes through these inventories and reads each one across, and he looks at the resentment, he looks at the cause, he looks which part of self is involved, and he looks at the character defect involved. He's going to check those out and see if he agrees with it as you agree with him. And if there's something there that he sees different, he's going to talk these things over with you and improve on your inventory. And as he goes through these things in a very detailed way, discussing with you, the chances are he's going to share also a little bit of himself and how he had problems and how he has similar things in his life. And as you go through these things, you'll find the loneliness begin to vanish in your life. You find out you're not unique. You find out, that you're a part of things. And you also, You will feel renewed in the fact that you can handle these things. You will feel renewed in the fact that you will be able to let go of them because you have seen the damage and effect of them when you get to step 6. So he says we explain upon what we have to do and why we have to do it. He said most people approach this way would be glad to help. They would be honored by our confidence. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Now we talk about every twist of character. Now we talk about our selfishness, our dishonesty, our self-seeking, our inconsideration, and how these things and the things they caused in our lives. You know, the pain and the wrongs they caused in other people's lives. We talk about these things. You know, our resentments go all the way back through our lives. You know, I didn't have my resentments didn't come from yesterday. Some of them come from 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, all the way back to the beginning. Like the guy said, when that doctor picked me up and spanked me, I've resented him ever since then. You know, I resented people that was dead. I mean, I just resented, you know, all through my life. So it was all the way back through my life, these resentments. And we went through these things, we discussed these things. He says, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. You know, step 5 is a very rewarding step. If we look at the steps up to this point, we look at step 1, because you don't get anything for step 1. That's just seeing the problem. There's no improvement in saying, well, that's the problem. There's no improvement in determining the solution. You know, you don't feel any better when you get the prescription. All the improvement begins with the action steps. And step 3 is just a decision. They're not allowed. It's a decision to take some action. But step 3 says it's just the beginning. Sometimes the effect is felt at once, but most time it's just the beginning. So you don't get a lot out of step 3. And step 4 is not real action. It's sitting down to identify the things to act on. But step 5 really is the first step of action. For the first time, we have gone beyond our own minds. We had to go outside of ourselves. And of all the steps that we have taken, there is more rewards from step 5 than all the 4 steps before it. We get more out of step 5. It was the first step of some real results. And it says, you know, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Now we have met ourselves. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs. You know, at step 2, we came to believe, and that's all we've been traveling on, up to step 5. But now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Step 5 is the beginning of the spiritual experience. Not step 3, where we just made a decision. But once we have put up some action, the first step of real action, this is the beginning of the spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem had disappeared would often come strongly. Sometimes after step 5, you know, for the first time, you know, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We feel we're on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. For the first time, you know, we get some confidence, you know, we know that things are beginning to happen after step 5. You know, most people take step 3 and wait for this to happen. The first step, and that's waiting for all these things. You know, you can study the program and you study the steps, and they will tell you where you are and when you're going to get it. After each step, it will give you the results. Now, after you take these steps, these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're pretty hard steps. And you wore out by now. Now, I love the big book is the first time you have a little rest is after step 5. You need to pause a little bit because you're pretty wore out if you took these first 5 steps. He said, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. And I love that. He did say an hour. He didn't say 3 weeks, did he? Careful reviewing. Sit down, careful reviewing what we have done. You know, let's look at these steps. We thank God from the bottom of our heart. We know him better. You know, at step 2, we just believed. But already we know God better than we did when we started. You know, we're not spiritual giants. Never will be, but we know him better. Okay. Taking the book down from the shelf, we turn to the pages which contains the 12 steps. We go to the page that contains these 12 steps we're trying to work. Carefully reviewing the first 5 proposals. We're going to look at the first 5 steps. We ask if we omitted anything. For we are building an arch to which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far, the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement, putting the foundation? Have we tried to make more without sand? You know, we go back and look at those first 5 steps. And you know, as he begins to draw, and as we said, the book is drawing pictures in our minds. You know, he says, remember, as we begin, he said, this new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. And he's sort of building this arch. You know, he's drawing pictures in our minds. And he's talking about this arch. We're going to go through this gate to freedom. And you know, in those, as we talked about how they built these arches, we said that step 3 was the keystone. You know, he said willingness was the foundation. He says step 2 was a cornerstone. Step 1 is the foundation. So we got 1, 2, and 3 in here. And this stone here is what's the keystone, the new and triumphant arch to which we pass to freedom. So we had those stones in there, and now we have put in step 4 and maybe probably step 5. So we got these in place. We're building an arch through which we're going to go to the freedom. And he says, we look at this thing, and I think, you know, he says that he associates this arch, paralleling the arch, with a spiritual experience. And we can see it developing in our lives. And this is the gate through it. The spiritual experience is the gateway to freedom. And he parallels it with this design. And as we begin to put these stones, he says we stop at step 5 and review and see if these things are properly in place. See if we have done these thoroughly. And he said if we can answer to our satisfaction, then we can go into step 6. But this is the foundation of our recovery. And we'll just begin. We're on our road. And I think, you know, as we begin to step 4 and 5 is the real pinnacle. Because the real success of the rest of the program lies in steps 4 and step 5. It's the information that we have gathered in step 4 and the improvement on this information that allows us to be willing now in step 6, if we have seen how damaging these things and destructive these things to our lives and the problems they have caused, then surely step 6, which we become willing to have them removed, this was very simple and very easy. You know, willing to let go of them in step 6. And then in 7, we're going to ask God to remove them. This is a very simple process. If we have done the job thoroughly in step 4 and step 5. And if we haven't done the job thoroughly in step 4 and step 5, then we need to do that, because then steps 6, 7, 8, and 9, and the rest of the steps become quite simple based on the efforts we put in step 3, 4, and 5. And if those are complete, then we can look at step 6. And next week we'll go in to step 6.